Hey, what is going on, everybody? My name is Ty, and this is my Chevy square body project. In the last video, we managed to get this small block 350 somewhat running. As you can see, this thing did idle, and then what I think happened is it flooded. And that was no fault but my own. So we've waited a couple days. I'm gonna try and turn the idle up, or at least the fast idle. And we're gonna see if we can get this thing to fire up and idle up to an RPM that I'm happy with for the break-in period. But before we do that, we need to get this choke working permanently. As you can see on the side of the electric choke, we do not have a ground on this. This may be one of the reasons why this thing flooded. And to eliminate that, we're gonna make a little ground harness here. Now, the easiest approach to this would probably be just to run a ground from here right to the carburetor base here. But what I think I want to do is run it back along with this wire to one of the rear ones, and that just cleans this thing up a little bit. I don't want some ugly wire just hanging out right here, even if the hat is kind of going to hide it. I want this thing to be perfect. I've spent this much time making everything else perfect. Let's go ahead and make this perfect.
So then, let's get to work. This is a pretty simple ground harness. One end is just an eyelet that's going to connect to the base of the carburetor, and the other end is just a spade connector that connects to the electric choke. That's all that's to this, but sometimes keeping something simple is the best way to do it. And just like that, this simple ground sub-harness is complete, and I think it turned out really nice and clean.
All right, let's get this thing on the truck. Can't even tell that wire is connected, and as you can see, it is working now. I've played around a little bit with the idle settings on here. Obviously the choke is still hot right now, but we're gonna see if we can get this thing to at least fire up and idle up to an RPM that I'm comfortable running this thing for. And then once we can achieve that, we can be comfortable doing the break-in on this. It's gonna require obviously hooking up the cooling system to it. But I wanna get this thing to fire and high idle before I go ahead and put a whole bunch of stuff in my way, like the radiator and the rad saddle. All right, so after playing around with the idle settings and the distributor ignition timing a little bit, I think I've got this thing to where I can get it to fire and rev up above 2000 RPM. That way we know that we have sufficient oil going to the camshaft during the break-in process. Now, I'm not gonna run this thing too long, obviously because the cooling system is not hooked up and there's no coolant in it, but we're gonna fire it up, show you that we can get this thing up to that RPM that we want it, and it actually sounds pretty good. It actually sounds a lot healthier with this camshaft in it than with the old camshaft, to be completely honest. But again, I've refreshed this motor and replaced pretty much everything on here. In other news, we confirmed that the two things that we didn't know worked yet do work, and that is the coolant temp sensor there. You can see it's actually started to climb a little bit. And then the RPM gauge that I have mounted down here, that was also working. I was watching that. And now that we know everything works and the engine runs and it's happy with all of this stuff, we can go ahead and clean all of this up and build a couple brackets to mount these wiring harnesses along the firewall about there.
First things first, we're going to go ahead and button up just a couple of extra wiring connections that we have to make. This is just a wire that runs along the frame rail to the back of the truck that I had just temporarily cut off, and now I need to re-splice. So in order to get the easiest access to taping this harness all up, we have to go ahead and remove a couple things. That includes the firewall junction block, taking everything off of that, as well as taking off the starter relay assembly And then all we have to do is unplug the two connectors that we just had plugged in, and we should be able to pull this wiring harness back over the brake booster and have easy access to tape this thing up. And the tape that I've decided to wrap this harness up with is actually just called Tessa tape. If you've been in the industry long enough, you know what Tessa tape is. A lot of manufacturers have actually started using this style of tape rather than full-on electrical tape. I would recommend getting the name brand Tessa tape. I know there's a lot of companies that make a similar product. I know people that use hockey tape. I find that Tessa tape just holds up the best, and if you ever do have to redo it or take it off, it doesn't leave that really sticky, crappy residue behind. It's also really easy to work with, especially in cold weather, because you know that the low quality tapes out there, as soon as it gets cold, not only does it not want to stick, it's not very malleable at all. Once we have this entire harness all taped up nice, we can go ahead and start reinstalling all the pieces that we just had to remove in order to get access to tape it. And look at how nice and clean this turned out. It's not quite as nice as the DR style shrink wrap that we used in previous videos. For something this intricate, Tessa tape was really the only option.
Now that all that wiring is taped up and looking pretty, we got to do something about these connectors just kind of hanging out where they decide to. I think what the plan is we're going to try and build little brackets that slot into, you can see on the bottom of these connectors, they have these little slots right here, and that's for something to slot into, like a clip or a holder. So I couldn't find anything specifically online that would work for this, because I'd like to make them out of metal, not plastic. I see a lot of the plastic ones online. I just don't like the plastic ones. They tend to break a lot easier. So I think I'm just gonna fabricate S-channel bracket that mounts directly to the firewall, and these things are gonna be tucked up. That one's probably gonna be about there, and then this one here, same idea, kind of along the firewall here, and that keeps everything somewhat organized and also easy to remove and install on the chassis. So I think I have officially devised a plan. What I'm planning on doing is using something like this, and what I think I'm gonna plan on doing is this is gonna be mounted to the firewall, and I'm gonna make this a like 90-degree bend, and then I'm gonna cut down the center so there's just the center of this left, and that's what's gonna mount that connector to it.
Let's start by mounting this bracket in the vise and shaping it to the shape that we want. Then we're just gonna go ahead and use these Knipex center cutters to cut through this metal like butter and cut out that channel that I was speaking of earlier. Remember guys, the sharper that your cutters are, the better quality cut they're going to produce. So using a good quality cutter that's sharp is very vital in making this thing look clean.
And just like that, we got two brackets. Now, these things look like absolute crap right now. So let's go ahead and sandblast them and then get them ready for a nice fresh coat of black paint.
So into the sandblasting cabinet these parts go. Sandblasting is by far the quickest and easiest way to get these things prepped for paint. Especially something as small as this, it took me no time at all to get these things cleaned up. If you don't have a sandblasting cabinet, this can also be done using a wire wheel or a bench grinder of that sort. It's not going to give you a perfect finish like the sandblaster, but it will be good enough once you lay down some paint. And speaking of paint, we're going to go ahead and use some engine enamel. This is gloss black that we're going to be using. And the paint that we're using actually contains ceramic as well for that extra protection. I went ahead and did 3 light rattle can coats, and these things are ready to go into the oven at 250 degrees for about 30 minutes. While we're waiting for those 2 brackets to bake, we're going to go ahead and get them ready to install on the firewall. You guys know that I really like rib nuts for applications like this, so we're going to go ahead and drill 2 holes in the firewall. We're going to seal them up with some black undercoating, and then we're going to go ahead and install our rib nuts into those holes. And now that our freshly painted brackets are officially dry, we're going to go ahead and mount them up into the firewall like this. Then we can go ahead and slide our 2 connectors onto the brackets, and voila, we got a secure solution to keeping those connectors from interfering with anything in the engine bay.
Honestly, I don't know how much I really like it. Like, it's clean, but we might have to revise this in the future because I'm not totally sold on the look. But at least we have easy access to unplug and plug in the wiring harness and the starter cable. so that if this thing ever does need to come back out, it's not a jumbled mess of wiring anymore. It's just unplug, unplug, pull the motor out. As of right now, we are officially finished with all of the wiring for this engine. There is one more thing that I want to do to make this chef's kiss. And since we aren't actually utilizing these two other leads off of the battery junction here, we're just going to take them off. And in the future, if we need a 60 or 70 amp feed, we have some spares. So let's get rid of these ugly wires hanging out of here.